Imagine you stand at the edge of the world's most arrogant wall, except the wall rises straight out of the sea, and the sea itself seems to obey it. You taste salt and iron on your tongue. You expect the city to kneel. But Tyre does not kneel. You arrive with the column while boots still grind grit from inland roads. The march ends, therefore the real work begins. You see the standard, bright, sure, impossible to ignore, moving like a verdict above helmets. You feel the weight of armor pulling down the shoulders, the strap biting the collarbone, the familiar ache that promises more pain soon. The men around you talk in low bursts, not because discipline demands it, but because the sea makes every voice feel exposed. Ahead, Tyre sits offshore like a locked fist. You see stone walls climbing from water with no gentle slope, no forgiving beach. Ships nestle behind those walls, masts like teeth. The city looks close enough to throw a rock at, therefore it feels like it should be reachable. But the water between is a living moat, shifting and deep, ready to swallow anything heavy. Envoys move forward. You see them in the open, small against the seawall, calling terms in voices that must carry over waves and pride. You feel the pause in the entire army, thousands of breaths held at once. It is the quiet that comes before a door opens. But the door does not open. The answer arrives polite, measured, almost courteous, therefore it cuts deeper. Alexander may not enter the island city. Not now. Not ever. You see faces tighten across the ranks like a rope pulled too hard. You feel something change that has nothing to do with weather. Purpose hardens. The air becomes a weapon. You watch Alexander's gaze lock on the island. It does not drift. It does not blink away. It fixes the city like a blade finds a throat and refuses to move until the cut happens. Officers shift, waiting for the shape of the response. You feel it in the way men stop scratching, stop joking, stop being human. A decision forms, and it forms fast. A rumor runs like fire through dry straw. The Tyrians seize messengers. The story changes from mouth to mouth, killed, chained, thrown from walls, therefore the effect stays the same. You see hands clench on spear shafts. You hear curses that sound like prayers. Somebody spits and it lands dark on the dust, as if the ground itself needs to be insulted. Orders snap down the line, sharp enough to cut. Build a road across the water. A causeway. A land bridge. You look at the sea and understand the madness in your bones. The city is offshore, defended by walls and ships, therefore you are told to march there on stone. Imagine the first basket of rubble tipping into the water. You see it sink, bubbles rising like the sea laughs. You feel the momentary relief. One load gone, therefore the next load immediately slams into your arms. The hauling line forms. Stone, broken masonry, timber, anything that can fill a gap becomes treasure. You lift until shoulders burn. You drag until knees tremble. Salt stings every cut on the fingers, therefore every grip becomes a small punishment. Someone shouts to keep the rhythm. Feet slide. A man trips. The basket tears. Rocks tumble and crush toes. He screams once, therefore the line steps around him. At first the causeway seems to obey. The water near shore is shallow enough that stones pile up and show their backs. You see a rough spine forming toward Tyre, therefore hope flickers. Men laugh through teeth. Someone says the sea is already surrendering. But the water deepens. You step farther out and the ground underfoot turns uncertain. The new stones vanish into the sea like offerings to a god that hates you. You throw a load and it disappears with no rise, no settling, just gone, therefore you throw another. You see supervisors marking progress with poles, watching the line inch forward like a knife that refuses to cut quickly. Every pace costs 100 loads. Every 100 loads buys one breath. Then Tyre notices. You hear the first sling stone before you truly understand it. It hums in the air with a sound like anger given wings. It strikes a helmet nearby with a crack like dropped pottery. The man under it folds, therefore the blood comes late. You see him sway, surprised, then collapse into the water with armor dragging him down. Hands reach. Fingers claw at straps. But the sea takes weight without mercy. You feel the work turn into a fight. Heads duck. Shields rise. The hauling continues anyway, because stopping means the city stays untouchable. Tyrian archers on the wall become dark pins against sky and stone. Arrows slap wetly into timber. Sling stones skip across water, therefore the surface itself seems to throw rocks at you. Men begin to build cover. You see crude screens of hides and planks pushed forward on wheels. They creak and wobble. You feel safer for a heartbeat, therefore a stone smashes through and turns the man behind it into broken meat. The screens keep moving. Imagine lifting timber for siege towers while the sea reaches up to steal the foundations. You see the wooden giants rising at the end of the causeway, braced and strapped, meant to throw bolts and arrows over the wall. You feel every nail driven as if it pins your own fate to the planks. The towers rock as waves slap the base, therefore men push wedges and pray harder. Ropes tighten. Pulleys squeal. You smell pitch used to seal joints, sharp and dark, therefore you taste it in the back of the throat. The towers inch forward, great boxes of timber and confidence. But the city answers with engineering of its own. At first it looks like a low boat drifting, almost lazy, almost harmless. You see it on the water beyond the causeway, moving with the current like a log. It rides too low. It sits wrong. Men on the wall watch with a stillness that feels like a grin. You smell it before you understand it. Oil, resin, something prepared. Someone points. Someone screams. Therefore, every head turns at once. The fire ship comes in, packed with fuel, guided by small boats that peel away at the last moment. It bumps the towers with the gentlest kiss, therefore the world explodes into flame. Fire climbs timber as if the wood begs to burn. The heat hits the face like a punch. You feel lungs tightening, air suddenly too thin. Men scramble. You see hands hacking ropes with knives that slip on sweat. You hear orders that become shrieks. Therefore discipline turns into panic and then back into discipline, because panic kills faster. You shove burning timbers with spear shafts. The shaft blackens and cracks. Sparks sting eyes. Smoke rolls, thick, oily. You cough and it feels like swallowing ash. Men jump into the sea to escape, therefore they surface screaming as flaming pitch clings to skin. Water does not save them. Water only spreads the fire. The towers collapse in sections, groaning like animals. A beam falls and crushes a man flat. You see his legs kick twice, therefore you step over him because stopping means you join him. The end of the causeway becomes a funeral pyre. You taste soot. You feel the skin of the face tighten. You hear the city's defenders shout from their wall, triumphant and distant, as if mocking from another world. But humiliation becomes fuel. The order comes down hard. Ships. Not a few. Enough to choke an island. You hear distant names, Cyprus, other coastal towns, spoken like tools being selected. Some allies come out of fear, some out of calculation, some at spear point. Therefore a fleet gathers like a closing fist. Imagine standing on the shore watching sails appear on the horizon. You see them multiply, white triangles growing, then darkening as they near. You feel hope rise and then twist into fear, because more ships mean a bigger battle, and bigger battles eat more men. Now the war has two fronts. You still stack stone on the causeway, but you also watch the sea for movement. The fleet forms lines, tests signals, adjusts or rhythms. Tar and wet rope fill the air. You see sailors with hands like knots. You hear the slap of oars hitting water in unison, therefore the sea itself seems to beat like a drum. The Tyrians sortie. Their ships come fast, sharp, proud, confident in home waters. When an enemy ship slips out, the stomach drops. When your side captures one, men roar. But every roar dies quickly, because the wall still stands, and the wall still throws death. Fog of war tightens at night. You hear talk of divers. Tyrian men swimming out under dark water, knives between teeth, cutting anchor cables. It sounds like a story meant to scare, therefore you laugh too loudly and pretend it cannot be true. Then you hear it. A snap in the darkness, a sound too clean to be accident. You see a mooring line whip and vanish. A siege barge drifts, helpless, turning sideways to the current. Men on it shout. Oars dig. It moves anyway, pulled by the sea toward enemy range. Therefore the wall's missiles find it. A stone hits the barge and splinters fly. An arrow finds a throat and the man drops without drama. The barge bumps another craft and tangles. You watch silhouettes struggle in the dark, therefore you feel the helpless anger of fighting an enemy you cannot see. Day returns and the causeway grows again, stubborn and ugly. More stone. More timber. More bodies. You carry until shoulders feel detached. You see fingers wrapped in cloth, bleeding through. You smell sweat turn sour under armor. Someone boils a strip of leather to chew because hunger begins to bite. Therefore, every bite tastes like despair. Tyre still looms offshore, but the distance shrinks. The city looks closer each day, therefore the defenders on the wall grow clearer. You begin to see faces, not just shapes. You see a man raise his arm to throw, and you track the motion like a hawk. You see his mouth open, shouting, therefore you imagine the words. Imagine standing on a half-finished road over open water while missiles fall like rain. You see the sea on both sides, ready to swallow. You feel the causeway narrow underfoot, and you realize there is no room to run. Therefore, the only direction is forward. The fleet presses the blockade tighter. Ships move to the harbors, testing chains, probing openings. Tyrian ships dart out, therefore your ships crash in to meet them. Wood slams wood. Oars splinter. Men fall between holes and vanish. You smell tar and salt and blood mixed together. The sea turns into a battlefield that refuses to hold the dead. Now the siege engines move onto ships. You see torsion bundles, twisted sinew and hair, drawn tight until they creak. You feel the tension in the air as if the whole world holds its breath. Then the bolt launches with a crack that makes you flinch. The bolt slams stone and chips fly. Therefore the wall begins to show wounds. Tyre answers with firepots. Clay arcs through the air and breaks, spilling flame that clings. A man tries to beat it out with his hands. His hands catch. Therefore his scream becomes the sound you cannot forget. The causeway reaches close enough that the wall feels like it leans over you. The end of the road becomes crowded with men and machines. You see battering rams mounted on floating platforms, swinging like blunt pendulums. You hear the thud as the ram hits stone. Again. Each impact travels up your legs through the planks, therefore you feel the wall resisting in your bones. The defenders fight like cornered wolves. They drop stones, they jab with spears, they hook ladders and pull. Something slams the shield beside your face and the wood splinters inward. For a blink you see daylight through the crack, therefore you understand how close death stands. Imagine the moment the wall begins to fail. You see dust puff from seams with every strike. You feel time stretch, because each hit might be the one. The ram swings. It hits. The wall shudders, therefore a thin, ugly line appears in the masonry. At first it looks like nothing. A hairline. A mistake. But it spreads. It grows into a jagged mouth. A stone shifts and drops. Then another. Therefore men around you stop breathing and then explode into shouts. Commanders scream for ladders. You run with one, hands under rungs, shoulders straining. The ladder is heavier than it should be because fear adds weight. The sea tries to steal footing. The surface near the wall churns with debris, broken planks, bodies, shields bobbing like dead leaves. Therefore, every step becomes a gamble. The first climber goes up fast and disappears at the top in a tangle of arms. You hear a wet sound. He falls back wrong, too loose, too heavy. His face looks surprised, therefore your stomach turns. But the ladder stays, and the press of men behind becomes its own wall. Someone shoves. Someone trips. You climb because stopping means being trampled or speared from above. Hands slip on salt-slick wood. Arrows hammer the ladder, dunking into rungs close enough to vibrate through your palms. Someone above kicks down. The ladder wobbles. Therefore your arms lock harder. You climb. Breath comes in harsh pulls. Armor drags. A missile scrapes the helmet and rings the skull. You blink and stars flash. Therefore the world narrows to the rung in front of the face. At the top, the edge arrives like a cliff. You see shield rims, eyes, teeth bared in effort. You crest the parapet and drop into chaos. Tyrian defenders are right there, breath hot, faces strained, fighting with knives, spears, anything that cuts. The smell is sweat and blood and fear, raw and immediate. Therefore the mind stops thinking and starts surviving. You swing. You block. You shove. A Tyrian grabs the shield and yanks, trying to pull you off the wall into the sea. You feel the pull in the shoulder joint, therefore you twist and slam the shield edge into his face. He falls back, but another fills the space instantly. You cannot see other breaches. You cannot tell if the fleet holds the harbor mouth or if Tyrian ships slip out to cut retreat. Smoke hides parts of the wall. Shouting turns directions into nonsense. Therefore, every step feels like stepping into a trap. Men pour up ladders anyway. The press becomes a living wave. You see a banner appear on the parapet, therefore the surge intensifies. The defenders give ground in inches, stabbing as they retreat, trying to keep you pinned on the narrow top. Imagine the instant your boots touch the island's side beyond the wall. You see stone underfoot that is not a floating platform, not a causeway, but true city ground. You feel triumph rise, therefore it collides with terror, because now the fight becomes close enough for kitchen knives. The push spills inward through a breach and down into streets. The city is not a single battlefield, it is 1,000 small ones. Alleyways become throats. Doorways become jaws. You turn a corner and a man leaps from a shadow with a short blade. You barely raise the shield. The blade scrapes and sparks. Therefore you drive forward and slam him into a wall. The noise becomes constant. Metal on metal, screams, the crack of wood, the thud of bodies. You step over broken household goods, bowls, stools, spilled grain. Therefore you realize this is not just a fortress. It is a home being dismantled room by room. Defenders fall back toward strong points. Some run toward temples, believing sacred stone offers mercy. Some throw down weapons and raise hands. But surrender feels like another kind of death. Therefore many keep fighting with the stubbornness of the doomed. Orders ripple through the attackers, sharp, hard to disobey. Take the city. Make it a lesson. The words are not always spoken aloud, but you feel the intent in the way men move. Therefore restraint thins. A group of Tyrians barricades a doorway. They thrust spears through gaps. Attackers hack at the wood. The wood gives. Men surge in. You hear pleading inside, mixed with anger, mixed with prayers. Therefore the moment becomes a blur of shapes and choices. You see a child's toy crushed under a boot. You see a woman dragged by the arm. You see an old man trying to stand in front of a doorway like a weak gate. Therefore the victory taste turns bitter. The fighting does not end cleanly. It spreads like spilled oil. Streets fill with bodies. Some defenders are cut down where they stand. Some are bound with rope, wrists raw. You see survivors herded, heads down, therefore you understand the city is becoming inventory. Ships wait at the horizon like open mouths. You see the harbor choked with holes, some friendly, some captured, all hungry for cargo. The cargo now becomes people. You hear chains. You hear names shouted and ignored. Therefore the word after loses meaning because it keeps happening. Imagine standing in a street that is finally quiet enough to hear breathing again. You see smoke rising from damaged roofs. You feel your own hands trembling, not from cold, but from what they just do. Therefore the mind searches for a reason that feels clean enough to live with. The Causeway, this road across the sea, stands behind you like a scar made of stone. It is proof that no water is wide enough if obsession has time and bodies to spend. You see it stretching back to the mainland, therefore you realize the message is larger than Tyre. Every coastal city now hears the same warning without needing words, resist, and the sea itself becomes your enemy, because Alexander builds a road to reach you. The siege is not only a battle, it is a demonstration of will. It is deterrence poured into rock. But a demonstration always has a price, and the price is not paid by kings alone. The dust settles. The cost becomes countable in moments. Empty stares, burned hands, missing friends, the silence where jokes used to live. You feel the bruises under armor. You taste ash that does not wash away. You see the bound survivors and the line of ships ready to carry them away. Therefore the victory stands tall and ugly, like the wall that once mocked you. Now the modern mirror slides into place because the pattern refuses to stay ancient. You have just lived the logic of total war and the psychology of deterrence. The Causeway is an ancient supply corridor, a bridgehead, a blockade made physical. When a leader decides a single no cannot be allowed to stand, engineering becomes a weapon. Therefore civilians become the currency of the lesson. Look closer. You see how fast a negotiation turns into a test of dominance. You feel how quickly a rumor about harmed messengers becomes permission for revenge. You watch men build something impossible not because it is wise, but because pride cannot afford to stop. Therefore ask what modern causeways look like, what projects, what sieges, what blockades are built today simply to make defiance feel futile. The verdict is this: Tyre's refusal turns into a catastrophe that rewrites the coast's future. The city pays in blood and chains. The attackers pay in months of hunger, terror, and dead friends, and they carry the memory like a stain. Therefore the road across the sea stands as a monument to a terrifying truth. Human will, once locked, turns geography into an inconvenience. Imagine standing on that causeway one last time, looking back at the island that finally falls, and realizing the road does not only reach a city, it reaches into the soul. You see what it takes to make a message undeniable. You feel the temptation to call it necessity. Therefore the question becomes dangerous. So do you see the same pattern today? A single refusal framed as intolerable. A leader needing the world to learn a lesson. A population turned into leverage. Therefore, the siege of Tyre does not stay in 332 BC, it echoes wherever power cannot endure defiance. Imagine the moment a future city says no to a power that cannot accept it. You see the engineers unroll plans. You feel the crowd's fear turning into hunger for safety at any cost. Therefore, this ungoogleable question waits in the dark for every age. When the road across the sea begins, when the first stone is thrown into the water, do you add your strength to the line, or do you refuse to become part of the machine that calls revenge a lesson?